what's going on, guys? I'm the original gamer, ogStevieStrow, and I'm here with famous artist and author, Matt Bailey. Matt, thanks for being here today.
Thanks.
I know you're taking time out of your busy schedule. You're going to be doing the Jimmy Kimmel show later, I believe. Oprah. So we have a big celebrity here, so I'm very happy that he took time to talk with us. But what are we going to talk about? We're going to talk about Matt's graphic novel, which is called Exiled Forever, which you can now get on Amazon.com, and we will have a link to the Exiled Forever website, the Facebook group or page, and the Amazon download link. We'll have links to all of that in this video description. And so we're going to talk a little bit about Matt, about a little bit of his story, the kind of the inspiration behind this. By the way, this is just it's an incredibly well done production. So when you look at this, and we'll look at some of the images, but it's really well illustrated and colored, and the printing and the binding and the publications, it just came out really good. And so it's just a nice, good whole package. You know, it's just well done, and highly encourage it. Yeah, if you like fantasy, if you like graphic novels. You know, he's got to put fuel in his Learjet, so you know that kind of stuff is not cheap. So you know we got to keep these copies selling. So yeah, the lighting makes it look kind of glossy. But yeah, Exiled Forever. So we'll talk about the story, the characters, and some of the inspiration. But maybe we'll start by just hearing from Matt a little bit about maybe some of your background, what you have done. Because I know what you did when you and I worked together, but some of the things you've done, and maybe lead up to kind of what inspired you to make Exiled Forever.
All right, great. Now that my head is like this big, thanks for that. But yeah, I've been drawing ever since I could pick up a pencil, and I was always inspired by cartoons, and I loved the Ninja Turtles when I was growing up. Always
the original, right? The
yeah.
original, the 80s Ninja Turtles.
Not these new movies that they got coming out now. But yeah, just loved drawing and getting into animation when I was older, and I haven't really went to school or anything for it. I did take like an art class a little bit in middle school.
Okay.
That's about it.
Yeah.
But when I got older, I started getting into comics, Ninja Turtle comics, of course, and it inspired me. I was like, oh man, I really, want to create a comic of my own. So I just started on regular paper and pencil, and I just did all the outlines and stuff. And but back then, I didn't have a computer or the stuff they have now to actually publish it and do all that crazy stuff. So yeah, I made like my first comic, or tried to make my first comic, probably when I was like 10. And I got like 30 pages in. I had a little story going, But I always enjoyed making my own stories too when I was younger. And I got into playing video games and RPGs. I loved RPGs because you just get like, involved in the story while you're playing the game. And yeah.
Very cool. So you basically have grown up liking comic books and liking a lot of the things I think a lot of people who are into, the kind of geek culture, sci-fi, fantasy, things like that. That's pretty cool. You have done some work as a professional artist, though.
Yes. After I graduated high school, my parents were like, "Hey, let's
get a job.
College.
get a job."
Well, I had jobs and stuff, not in any career fields or anything, but yeah, my passion, was art. So when there was a job fair in a digital domain, so I went to that, and I was like, "Oh, this would be so awesome to get into this." Mm-hmm. And I went there, I showed them my portfolio, and they were like, "Do you know roto and depth grading?" I'm like, "What is that?" I was like, no. So after that, I was like, oh man, I failed. I don't even know what this is they're doing. They're not going to call me back. I think it was like 2 weeks later I got a call from them, and they're like, how would you like to work for Digital Domain? I was like, oh, this is amazing. Of course, I would love to. So I worked for them, and they trained us, and
That was your first job, your first artist job at
yes.
Digital Domain? Okay, which is where you and I met.
And I was introduced to Mocha and some of the rotoing and stuff. And I was like, oh, this is really cool. It's easy. I can learn this. And so eventually they had classes. They had the rotoing class, and then they had the painting class.
Okay.
And you could choose which one you wanted to get into. And at first I was leaning towards the painting class, but then after seeing it for a little bit, I'm like, wow, this is a little out of my area.
and anybody who's listening right now, when we're talking about painting, we're not talking about painting on canvas either. This is all digital art, so it would have probably been like in Photoshop for like matte painting or something like that, or
yeah, it was in Photoshop and Nuke, which
Nuke, which is the compositing. So what did you end up doing? Like, what was your title there when we were in Digital Domain in Florida? Were you a rotoscope artist, or was it more general stereoscopic, or?
Well, it was a mix of rotoscope and stereo depth, so it was just called stereoscopic 3D department. Yeah.
And rodeo, yeah, yeehaw! Rotoscoping, if I'm not mistaken, and anybody who doesn't know what that means, it's kind of like tracing around something, right? So an oversimplification would be like if you ever used the lasso tool in Photoshop to draw around something. So you're taking a piece of a picture to cut it out, and because we were doing three-dimensional, we were making 3D movies, you had to like cut out a person so you could make him look like he was further. You can make objects look like they were in the foreground or the background. So rotoscoping as an art form is taking elements of an already produced picture and breaking it into separate elements, almost like reverse engineering something into Photoshop.
Yeah.
Or if we had it in Photoshop, we would have these elements, but we don't have the elements, so you have to create the elements or create these assets, right? So that's kind of what you did, which is pretty cool. So this is digital art, digital production, and that was your first experience doing that?
Yes.
Oh,
yeah.
That's cool. That's very cool. And that was a fun ride while it lasted. So what were some of the movies that you worked on that you converted to 3D while we were there? Do you remember any of this?
I did some of Transformers 3 and Smurfs.
The first Smurfs movie.
Yes. Yeah. What are they on now? Like 4 or something? I don't know. I remember we were working on Transformers 3. It was like the first shot our team was working on. And it only lasts for like a couple of seconds in the movie. It's the one part where the robot comes to the
Transformer, right? Or is it still is a Transformer still a robot? Yeah, okay, yeah.
Well, the Transformer.
The Transformer, yeah.
I think it was like a pterodactyl transformer or something like that. But he goes to the guy's house and kills his family and stuff. But the camera's shaking around and everything, and stuff's going wild. So there's a lot of motion blur and everything. So we're trying to trace these objects out with moving around everywhere and motion blur and stuff. And I was just like, wow. And then I watched the movie, and it lasts 2 seconds.
Yeah. Had you done digital art before working for Digital Domain? Have you done things in Photoshop or Illustrator on a computer or anything like that?
Yeah, I have Photoshop and Illustrator on my computer at home, and I was always using Photoshop to draw my pictures and stuff. And then I found a new program called Manga Studio, so I started using that, and it's really nice. It's more geared towards drawing stuff for comics and kind of anime type stuff and everything. And it comes with a few 3D models and backgrounds for reference and everything. And it'll set up to like the panels and stuff.
What did you do to make the art in here? Is this like all Photoshop?
No, this is all Manga Studio.
Oh, this is done in Manga Studio.
Yeah, I just didn't use the panel.
Okay, you didn't use them to make panels.
Yeah, but I did use everything else for it.
Yeah, man, it looks really good. You got full scenes. You got yeah. And what I love about this is mostly a visual storytelling style, is that you can just say a lot with just a picture. You're immediately taken somewhere. Like right now, I'm looking at this, and this kind of reminds me of the Ewok village a little bit. But yeah, so you're here, and you know right away you're in the woods, and you know what you just know where you are, and you kind of get the sense of that right away. So, and that's one page, and you've already said, here we are. You're just sucked into that part of the world. So all the artwork was done digitally or on a computer, electronically drawn. You still used your bare hands to draw this, but you drew it in a computer. So this is still, manually drawn by hand as if you would have drawn on paper, but you're now, and this is the modern way that everything is done now. Everything's done in a computer. So, and when you draw, did you paint it all in at the same time, or did you draw it like just black and white first and then paint it later?
Well, originally I was thinking about not having any color and just having it black and white, because it would have been cheaper to sell.
Okay.
Because they charge a certain more price when you have it in full color and everything.
Right.
But then I was like, if I'm going to do this, I really want it to be colorful and,
and the colors really pop.
And, the colors can tell the story too.
Yeah, yeah.
And I was really satisfied too with the way they all came out, printed-wise. They're very bright and vibrant and...
Yeah, that is a challenge, right? Because when we do something on our computer screen, the colors are always going to be brighter than how they appear on, because ink doesn't have anything behind it to light it up. You can't backlight a page. So anybody who's doing like art with lots of colors typically finds that printed stuff never comes out as good. But yeah, I can see things like the fog in here, like when he's going through this bog, I can see the fog and the mist and stuff. So yeah, there's detail in here. It's really cool. It's really cool. So let's talk about the story a little bit. And so this is book 1. How many books are there? Do you know yet?
I'm thinking 3, possibly 4.
Okay. So do you know how it's going to end yet, or is that still a work in progress in your mind?
I have a pretty good idea how it's going to end. I have a lot of the story in my head.
Okay.
And it's just getting, finer details and, making it all come together. And
cool. So let's talk about the story and some of the characters and the inspiration. So I'm going to read straight here from the back of the book, which is kind of like a synopsis here. But it says, Skynora and her spirit wolf Alpha are bounty hunters in a lawless land. When they take a contract with a reward that sounds too good to be true, they find themselves wanted dead by everyone. Their journey will lead them to find the ancient secrets lost to the world, and why all of the dragons disappeared thousands of years ago. I mean, that's cool. That's a great little teaser for, what is this story going to be about? Am I hooked? Is my interest hooked? And the cover art here, which you can see here, what I love about it is it's a female lead. And she is drawn very well. I love anything that's got a female badass in it. I'm a big fan of Tomb Raider. Anything with a very empowered female protagonist, I'm a big fan of. I love her wolf Alpha. He's just super cool looking. So, what was some of the inspiration for these characters and like this story?
Well, like you said, I'm very big fan of strong female leads also. And I used to watch, you ever seen The Last Airbender?
Oh,
Avatar?
yeah. I'm familiar with it, but I haven't watched it a lot, so I would not pass any trivia contest.
Oh. That was one of my favorite shows, and
okay.
They have a lot of strong characters and female characters, bad guys, good guys, both.
Okay.
And yeah, it's always intrigued me, to have that strong female in there. And I love wolves and dragons and the medieval type era.
Right.
Sword fighting and, magic, all that stuff. And yeah, it just kind of all came together, and Uh, when it first all came together, I had a character in my head, was her. I was like, I really want her to have, the long, red, fiery looking hair.
Right.
And originally she was going to use a bow and arrow instead of a sword.
Okay.
But I was like, there's a lot of characters that have the bow and arrow, the female character and everything.
Okay.
I was like, oh, let's, give her a sword instead. And then I was like, well, it'd really be cool if she had a wolf companion. Because I haven't seen that really in any stories or anything.
Okay.
And it just kind of worked from there, and then I developed the story more, and created more characters and everything. And originally I was going to write it as a book, and but then I found CreateSpace, and they found they could publish it for free, and they do graphic novels, and I'm like, well, that's what I want to do. I want to draw it,
Okay.
I want it visually, so like this is perfect. And that's when I started really writing everything down and really creating everything. And then I started doing all the roughs on a computer. I did the whole book to make sure, I had every scene the way I wanted it and everything. And then I traced over it and fine-tuned all the pictures. And then after all that was done, then I added the color to everything.
Okay. Was the story developed more visually, or was it maybe written or scripted first, or was it just kind of in your head? Did you type it out like text-wise and have like a written short version of the story, or were you kind of like coming up with the story with the pictures?
Well, I guess since I made the characters first, it was more visually at first. It kind of became out of them. So I wrote them and was like, oh, what kind of character is this? And then I created the world around them, and the jobs they do and what they do it for and all that stuff.
Okay.
And I started writing it first because I wanted to get it all down and make sure I had it, the way I wanted it and everything before I started drawing it and doing all that stuff. And I went through a couple of drafts. Even after I was drawing it and like halfway done, I changed a few things here and there and everything.
Yeah.
And then even after it was all finished, I went back and upgraded some pictures, changed a few things. I was like, this isn't working as well as I thought it was, and stuff like that. So it was constantly changing. The story was shifting a little bit till I finally got the way I liked it.
It's very easy to read. It's very easy to follow. I love the colors in it. I love the worlds and the locations that we go to. There's just a lot going on, and I mean, it's like you can see little pieces in here, like the fact that she's a female and she wears a green cloak. You could say, well, if it's intentional or not. But we had that conversation. You're a big fan of Zelda, but it wasn't purposely designed to look like Link. But when you see a badass person in a green cloak, you can't help but say, oh, is it kind of... But she is like her own. Now, is she an elf technically because she's got the pointed ears? Or is that not really stated and for us to determine?
It'll be in book 2 later. It'll describe more of what she actually is. But no, she's not an elf. She's a different
Vulcan?
race. I can't do it.
It took me a minute. Are you out of your Vulcan mind?
But something like that too. The fact that she has the ears, but nobody else in her village does.
Right. So that's a little seed.
She wasn't really born there or anything.
Okay. Okay. I love that we've got a lot of different races too. So you've got, most of the characters in her village are very humanoid looking, but the minute you get to the tavern, it's almost like a medieval version of the Star Wars Cantina. You got a lot of different characters, and you've got characters that look like the rhinoceros breed, or this guy here with the mustache. I'm not sure what he is, if he's a cat or a dog or a wolf type person, but He's cool looking. Hyena?
He's supposed to be a panther.
Oh, a panther. Okay. So so you walk into this kind of setting now where you've got this Western saloon, if you will, but you got a couple of brothers who are rhinoceros humanoids, and one of them's got a mohawk, one's got a cowboy hat. They kind of reminded me of a little bit of like Rocksteady and Bebop from Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. And again, it's probably not intentional, but a lot of what we do, you know, you can't help but have what's in your psyche, but what you've grown up with, you know. But there's really cool stories and just the way the panels flow and how they take us everywhere. But we've got so much diversity in locations and different characters, different agendas that are going on. You know, you've got the guy that they're after with the bounty hunter. He's got an interesting story that we don't fully see, but there's a nice element of things are not all what they seem, which is always great in a story where a character is not one-dimensional at all, and there's more to them, and you see some kind of character development throughout the story, but we've got a lot of that in here. There's action. There's nice action sequences, and just think about it. It's like, here we got guys fighting on top of a train, you know, like motion. This is like a great fight scene like you would see like from a, or is it a train? It's a cart, right? But yeah, so you got guys fighting on top of moving things, you know, so there's like some Hollywood cinema scenes going on in here.
I wanted to make it, you know, like a movie type, and I wanted to make sure there was action as well as, you know, adventure and all that stuff. And the action scenes are actually probably the hardest ones, you know. It's like, you want everything to look good and entertaining, you know, and while, you know, story scenes, you can have the characters there and, you know, make their facial expressions, but action scenes, they have to be, you know, looking cool and in the motion of everything. And
as hard as it is to draw this and convey it, it's got to be easier than trying to do it definitely live action. Or even like full computer animation.
Yes.
So when you've only got to do a handful of panels, but yeah, you get the sense that these guys are moving as they're fighting on top of the moving carriage or cart, whatever you want to call it, thing there. Man, there's so much going on. I mean, you took us to so many places, introduced us to a world and a lot of characters. Yeah, I mean.
Yeah, I wanted to keep it entertaining and show different areas, because in this book I wanted to introduce, you know, the main characters. I wanted to get them, their personalities out there and show everyone what they're about and everything. And since most of the time it's just these few characters together and they're traveling, I wanted them to go through these different locations. You learn more about this world and all the dangerous stuff that's constantly coming out, and everything, you know, is just trying to kill them, because this is like a post-apocalyptic world. Thousands of years ago, you know, or I call them lands. They're kind of like a human, you know, type thing, but their own thing. But the lands and the dragons used to live together, but the lands, you know, got selfish. They wanted the magic and the power, and the dragons are immortal. They can only be killed. They can't die naturally or anything, so they just live forever. And lands, you know, they wanted all that for themselves. They wanted the magic, they wanted the power, and eventually it led to their demise. The dragons retaliated and almost destroyed, you know, the whole world, and then they fled to a different realm, you know, never to return. And it just kind of picks up from there. 1,000 years later, you've got this world that's not, you know, not like our world where we have the big cities and cars and everything. It's more, you know, modern with lots of nature and animals and dangerous creatures and everything. And there's villages here and there, but, you know, very small. There's not a lot of people living on the planet.
Okay. It kind of reminds me of a cross of like medieval and Wild West. You've got this big displacement of populations. You've got lots of territory to cover, but then you have the fantasy element in here, where as you're crossing through here, there are large savage beasts to contend with. And then the kind of spooky swamp was kind of cool too. So just very kind of cornerstone set pieces that you would see in any big story, like a Tolkien story or Game of Thrones or lots of things like that. This is much less dense than Game of Thrones is, but there's a lot of, and if you think about it, if you look at most of popular culture, you pick any genre, sci-fi, fantasy, anything, everything has inspired everything else. None of it is deliberately stealing or plagiarizing, but there's this influence, there's this kind of DNA in fabric, and it almost kind of more reinforces the genre if you think about it, because there's so many stories of fantasy that have dragons. Yeah. And we've grown up knowing about dragons to the fact where we just believe dragons are real. And if you don't believe they're real, anytime a dragon's introduced to a story or a TV show or anything, you just accept it because we've always known about dragons. So are they stealing from somebody because they've got a dragon? You can't copyright a dragon, you know what I mean? But there's these components that have been established and have been around that just make up the fabric of these stories that we love. And there's lots of little pieces of things that are familiar to the genre, but the story is pretty interesting, I think.
Yeah, it's the thing. There's billions and billions of stories. I mean, it's impossible pretty much to be just completely nothing you've ever seen before, Like everyone takes inspiration from, things they grew up with, things they enjoyed. And it's what makes, stories better, They get that familiarity with other things they've seen.
A new take on it.